Amelia Phillips, welcome to the podcast and thank you for returning the favour.
Oh, I love a good pod swap. I really, really do. I absolutely loved having you on my podcast recently. So, yeah, if you guys enjoy our chat today, head over to my podcast as well. And we talk about all sorts of different stuff. But you and I could talk all day underwater, shared interests, shared values. I love it.
Exactly. And your podcast, just for those, is called The Healthy Her. Now, like me, you're an exercise scientist, you're also a nutritionist, you're also a researcher, but you also specialize in online programs and biotech, which I've dabbled in, but I think you're a lot more successful. And you are the coach on the TV show, the Australian TV show, Do You Want to Live Forever? You're also the founder of Vitality 360 and a podcaster. Clearly, you're a bit like me with the devil makes work for your idle hands, so you've got to keep yourself busy.
100%. And also, how lucky do you feel to be in an industry where you never stop learning
Yeah.
and where you wake up in the morning and your mind gets blown again and again? Like 26 years in this industry, you'd think I'd be a bit jaded or sick of it by now. But even in the last 5 years, I have got more fire in my belly and more motivation than I had 10 years ago because technology evolves, the research evolves, and we are literally saving lives and extending health span, and it's happening every day. And like, I just wake up, I'm like a kid in a candy store. I'm like, okay, well, what else is gonna, what amazing new trial is gonna be released that shows us how we can extend our health span? So yeah, I feel pretty lucky to love what I do, as you do
Yeah,
as well.
I totally agree. It's a lot better than being a banker. That's for
Yeah.
sure. No offense to all of the bankers that I know, and I know a lot, but it is nice to do something for a living that you would do in your spare time
Yeah.
anyway. And
Yeah.
now we met 15 years ago, I reckon, about 15 years ago, at an after party for a rather large event.
Yes,
You
and
remember that?
you were dressed as a Smurf.
Oh, was I?
Yeah,
I could-
and you were so drunk. If you could imagine a 6 foot something drunk Smurf, that's how
I
we were
didn't.
introduced. I don't know how we're still talking today.
God, that's funny. I tell you what, my mates from the UK will not be surprised to know that I was dressed as a Smurf. I was about to say it's been quite a while since I was dressed as a Smurf, but actually it's been about 6 months since I was dressed as a Smurf.
Is this your thing? Is
It
this like
is
one
my
of your like cheeky, behind
it,
closed doors or
well,
fetishes?
not so much behind closed
True.
doors. I first Smurfed. Jesus, 25 maybe years ago. I was introduced by a mate of mine, Jason, and we went on Smurfing. I think might have been my stag do or his stag do. I can't remember whose, but I just loved it. And we had a Gargamel out with us, about 15 Smurfs and a Gargamel. And my now wife was dressed up as the cat as well.
Uh-huh,
And and
I
uh,
like it.
and I loved it so much that I now have a rule that if anybody visits me from the UK, we go out dressed up as Smurfs and go on the
My
piss.
God, I love
And
it.
and I'm very serious about it. I only ordered the best blue theatre paint.
Oh
And
my goodness.
and so I'll tell you a little. This is an unexpected little rabbit hole that we're going down. But a mate of mine, Tyrone, who may or may not be listening, has been pestering me for years to go to a music festival. And then I eventually agreed last year, and I said, right, I will go to a music festival if you allow me to choose the color. And he was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so I think there was five of us went, and I brought five Smurf outfits
Oh
along,
my
and we all got dressed up
God.
as Smurfs, and it was brilliant.
See, look, health experts don't have to be boring and don't have to, color in the lines. You can have a lot of fun, and you, my friend, know how to have a good time. And
Oh,
I
yes.
love that about you. But yes, clearly didn't hold it against you because here we are 15 years later.
Indeed. And then look, let's not make this about smurfing. Let's get back on track. However, you would make a good smurfette with your long blonde hair.
Would
I'm
I?
just putting it
Okay.
out
All
there.
right. Well,
Just
I'm
putting it out there.
open. I'm open to having my arm twisted for the right
Just
event.
be careful what you say. Be careful. So let's talk about longevity. We're both geeks in this longevity space and the health span space. And there's so much stuff out there. A lot of it good and a lot of it horseshit.
Mm,
So let's just kind of go through. I'll just throw it over to you to
mhm,
separate the wheat from the chaff, right? So
mhm,
so what is the stuff that you think is good that's out there that people should be
mhm.
listening to? And what's the crappy stuff or
Okay.
the yet to be demonstrated, yet to have the science demonstrated to the level that the
Mm.
influencers talk about, shall we say?
Yeah, I love all the TikTok trends you see doing the rounds. And look, a lot of them are horseshit, as you say, but then every now and again, some of them actually do have some evidence behind them, or they've got just an adherence. The way that they're designed, some of those TikTok trends actually are really easy to adhere to, or they're motivating. But before I kind of go into the specifics, I will often talk to people about, I call it the ladder approach. When you think about your health, and we do this in nutrition, but also overarching, when you think about your health, imagine this ladder analogy where the very bottom rung of the ladder is, you know, don't do stupid shit. Don't poison
Mm,
yourself. So get off the drugs, get off the alcohol. And you think of this ladder approach almost like a health ladder. So what you've got, the bottom of the rung is that, you know, don't step in front of a bus and get hit by a bus. Don't take illicit drugs unless you're smurfing. And then you go up, you know, and then it's like cut the crap food. You know, if you're eating your takeout and your KFC all the time. So what I see happening as we climb up the ladder, you then, you know, you get to, all right, should I be going for, I'm having a really healthy whole foods diet, so should I now be going towards more organic foods? What I
mm,
see is people on the bottom rungs of those ladders who might be carrying excess body fat. They might have some really poor lifestyle choices, you know, they might not be exercising, and they're the ones coming to me saying things like, should I be taping my mouth shut, should I be
mm.
doing hot cold therapy, um
Taking
and
taking NMN
yeah,
and stuff like that,
exactly. Or
right?
should I be taking these supplements? And, you know, they're geeking out over supplements, but they're overeating and under exercising. So I think when you look at the whole landscape of all the health, you know, habits and behaviors we can make, see where you are on the ladder. And if you're, I mean, a lot of your listeners are going to be very, very health literate and probably well and
Mm,
truly up the ladder. So if you're into the 1 or the 2 percenters, then yes, some of these trends and some of these more innovative, um, uh, you know, techniques, or for example, hydrogen water, for example,
mm,
mouth taping,
yeah.
cold plunges, you know, really specific supplements like creatine and things like that. That's when you're up there, then yes, let's have a conversation about that. But if you're not sleeping well, if you're not getting regular exercise, if you're not managing your body composition, then you've got to focus on those things first. So I just want to caveat all of this by saying
Mm.
that.
Yeah, look, very good point. And I often talk about you don't build a $5 million house on shithouse foundations, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't build it on sand. So getting the foundations right. And I talk about 4 pillars, 4 foundational pillars, which pretty much what you said: exercise, good nutrition, sleep and recovery, and mindset, right? And if you have those four, then you can build all the fancy shit on top of it. But
Yeah.
if you don't have those four, all that fancy stuff is going to be not all wasted, but certainly suboptimal and not the best use of your time.
Absolutely. And look, I always feel like this saying, energy goes where focus flows. Oh, sorry, no, I've got that wrong. Energy flows where focus goes. So
Yep.
I deal with everyday people all the time. So my programs, we've got over 1,000 members on our Vitality 360 platform, and we've got everything from the complete biohackers to, people that have struggled their whole life with their weight. And what I do see is quite commonly people focusing on one small element like supplements, for example, when they haven't got those other pieces in place, and they think that, oh, if I take myo-inositol for my insulin resistance, that's going to solve everything. But actually, no, it's the harder stuff, unfortunately, and the stuff that, like exercising more and managing your sleep, that is really going to move the needle. So I try to work really hard to create simple strategies that make those much bigger levers, like the 4 foundational pillars you just mentioned, easier to manage and not get distracted by those little 2%ers, because they really do, they really can be distracting. And so the same thing with health, you see a lot of people talking about all these fancy and advanced tests, but are you getting your annual breast cancer screening? Are you doing the
Your bile cancer as
preventative
well. Yep. Yep.
screens as well? So that would just be my other little warning bell. We get all excited about these new and innovative tests, but there's a lot of really important tests out there that we should be getting. Cervical screens for women, annual skin checks. Just make sure you're doing all that foundational stuff before we get too fancy.
Yeah, and look, we will come into tests and biomarkers a little bit later on, but
Yep.
if we come back to the topic of longevity and health span,
Mm.
let's take probably the most controversial pillar,
Mm-hmm.
which is the one of nutrition. Right,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many opinions out there around nutrition, and I always say that anybody who tells you there's one diet that everybody should be eating is either demented, or they're trying to sell you something, or they're a member of a cult, or
I
potentially
love
all
that.
three, right?
I agree with you 100%.
So
Agree.
what advice do you give to the people that you work with
Mm.
around nutrition?
Mm. So 100% agree. I don't I don't attest to having one particular dietary pattern that, that I focus on. If I had to pick one and one only, the Mediterranean diet, and that's where I hear
Agreed.
everyone
Yep.
roll their eyes and go, "Oh," but it's just nowhere near as clickbaity as carnivore
Yes.
diet or
It's boring, but there's so much friggin' research behind it,
yeah.
right?
And I think when it comes to diet, it's more important about the pattern. And you'll hear a lot of
Mm,
researchers talking about someone's dietary pattern, which means that, the pattern overall might be a lower carbohydrate pattern, but it doesn't mean there's no carbohydrates in it, for example. But in a nutshell, we are talking about, the Mediterranean style, where we're dialing up all those nutrient dense foods, the fibrous foods. We are dialing down the ultra processed foods. We're dialing up a lot of those anti inflammatory foods that contain a lot of polyphenols. So we're talking
mhm.
about extra, cold pressed extra virgin olive oil. The challenge with this is for people listening, they go, oh, well, that's a bit confusing because it doesn't have those binary, I can't eat this and I have to eat that. And I think that's where a lot of these diets get traction. Because if you're just like, hey, you just have to cut all carbs and only eat meat. Well, people kind of go, oh, well, I can
Yeah.
handle that. But I will say a few things. So, with that said, just a general, healthy diet overall, I do find my ladies do respond very well to a lower carbohydrate diet, particularly less carbohydrates in the second half of the day, as in high GI foods, because once
Yep.
we're hitting that perimenopause, and even for men as well, once they're getting into that older over 50s bracket, our blood sugar regulation does get impacted. And I just
Yep.
find that people do respond better. And generally, when you take out the high GI foods, it means that you're creating more space for more protein. You're creating more space for nutrient dense foods as well. Because if your plate's not full of mash or pasta, then it's probably going to be full of some healthy lean proteins. So that would be cutting the carbs down, definitely at night, I find works really well. Increasing protein intake. I mean, protein and fiber
Yeah.
combined is nature's Ozempic.
Yes.
If you
Yeah.
want
Oh,
to,
I love that. I really like that.
yeah,
Protein and fiber, nature's Ozempic, and I couldn't agree more.
because it's all about slowing that gastric emptying. The Ozempic works because people feel fuller for longer. There's obviously lots of other factors at play, but if you can feel fuller for longer, you're obviously going to be less inclined to reach for the unhealthy, high sugar, high fat, high salt foods. So yeah, fiber, protein combined is a real winner. So I'm sorry it's a
Can
bit
I just
boring.
no? Can I just jump in there? Just with so there's a subsection of the longevity crowd who are very pro low protein. So they would say that protein activates mTOR, and mTOR is basically an aging switch because it's a growth pattern and it encourages cancer growth and all sorts of other stuff. But I think the research around this is really not clear on humans. They often talk about animal studies. The one human study I think on that was the Biosphere, which went horribly wrong, and they had calorie restriction and low protein. And yes, they had some biomarkers that would suggest that they may live longer, but they were friggin' miserable. They were depressed. They had no libido, all of that stuff. And I think the thing for people to understand is that as you get older, your ability for muscle protein synthesis degrades, just like your ability to process glucose degrades. And so for me, if you want to strike the balance, it's eat 3 meals a day, throw the snacks away, right?
Yeah, we do not
We don't
need to
need
snack.
snacks.
Over
Not
the age of 50 or 40, I mean, we really do not need to snack.
And you need to snack if your blood sugar's going crazy because you're eating too much carbohydrate and not enough protein. And
Yeah.
you'll feel fuller for longer, to your point, if you have more protein and fiber. And you'll find then that 3 meals a day will do you. And then you're only switching on mTOR 3 times. But mTOR is important for muscle. And, if you look at mice, a lot of them get killed by cancer. And that's why having low mTOR extends their lifespan, but more people die of sarcopenia-related diseases than cancer, right?
I was literally about to jump in and say, other than heart disease, frailty-related death and illness and death is up there. I think it is the number 2 cause of death. Don't quote me on that, in the elderly population after heart disease. And so when you think of the fact that we are all going to be older longer because we are doing all these great longevity protocols, we're going to be old for a long time. And so that body composition, as in bone health, managing body fat, managing muscle mass, preventing sarcopenia, osteopenia, osteoporosis, is really, really important. And so I know Peter Attia has this great analogy, which I think is so good, where you want to hit those elderly years at the top of your game from a strength perspective, from a mobility perspective, because you're going to decline no matter what. You want to be declining from up here, not entering it in a pre-frailty position where then you're already behind the 8 ball. And so that's why I think, yes, I understand where the researchers are coming from and where that theory is around protein. But for me, managing muscle and protecting muscle
Yeah, way more important.
is a much bigger priority.
Yeah, and it's not just the direct causes of sarcopenia, such as osteoporosis and falls, which are big killers, but it's the contribution of sarcopenia to diabetes, to dementia, to heart disease, to all of those things. So if you wrapped it all up, I think you'd find that sarcopenia is probably the biggest driver. If you looked at direct and indirect effects, I reckon you probably find it's right at the top of the tree. Right?
Yeah,
So,
and I'd love to understand mitochondrial impacts on that as well, because
Yeah.
obviously mitochondria, the largest amount that we have is in our muscles. And
Yes.
so if we've had a massive decline there, I'd love to understand, when you're looking at mTOR and then you're looking at mitochondria, which one outweighs the other, because we
Yeah.
obviously want that mitochondrial function to be as high as possible for as long as possible.
Completely agree, and that's why I think the mTOR guys, they're just way too narrow,
Yeah.
way too narrow. So look, that takes care of the nutrition bucket, and I think we're both in agreement. A kind of a modified Mediterranean diet with higher protein, lower carbs, especially as you get
Yeah.
older, or if you have fat around the middle, that's a
Yeah.
bloody carbohydrate problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's then go in and talk about, rather than do a detailed one on each one of those, because that'll be a whole podcast. Say you have it sorted, right? So that your nutrition is good, that you're exercising, and I think we would both agree a combination of cardiovascular and strength training,
Yeah.
and you're sleeping well, your mindset's good. What then would you start to layer in of all those things? You mentioned some of them, like hydrogen water, mouth taping, cold plunge, creatine. What are the ones that would be the up near the top of the list? And I know it'd be different for different people, but just throw out a number of them that you think there's a reasonable amount behind it.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to an
let's keep supplements to the end.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to talk to an over 40s age group. Is that okay? So people that are kind of in that midlife.
Yeah.
So,
look, I agree, because if you're under 40 and you're doing all those other things, you don't need all this other shit.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you need it when your body's slowing down, right? So off you go.
Yeah. Okay. So just from an exercise perspective, definitely VO2 max training in there as well. So you need to do that high intensity training, which often drops off. But that to me is a really, really important biohack that we need to include. I like some healthy stresses, and you and I did a whole episode around healthy and unhealthy stresses, which I found I absolutely loved. And I think some of those healthy stresses, and we talked about hot and cold, for example. Now, for women, the cold plunge is very controversial, and I'm definitely not an expert in that area, but I definitely think that using heat and cold therapy in a format that feels right for you. So for me, for example, heat and cold together feels right. So you're getting that vasodilation, and we know that circulation, we know that cardiovascular health is so important. And when you are changing those temperatures, going, for example, you're doing 8 minutes in the sauna and then you're going and having a cold plunge or even just a cold shower and then jumping back in the sauna, you're getting a lot of vasodilation, where you're getting these blood vessels that are almost like doing, having a workout.
Completely. Vasodilation, vasoconstriction. It's a massive workout for your cardiovascular system.
Yeah. And so from a biohacking perspective, when you think about how important our cardiovascular system is, and we know that women and heart disease skyrockets after menopause, looking after our cardiovascular system is super important. So that's why I love the VO2 max, which is again driving up that the health of our cardiovascular system. I do like that hot and cold therapy. They're ones that
Can I just jump in, Amelia, with my comment on the cold? Because it is, there's a bit of controversy around it. Like 8 minutes in an ice bath is just for your ego. Just as simple as that.
Okay.
Right? I interviewed Professor Mike Tipton. You should get him on. Actually.
Okay.
The world leader on cold exposure. And Mike says the vast majority of the benefits come in the first 30 seconds.
Interesting. Is that right?
If you stay in long enough until you shiver, you're now having a negative effect on your immune system. Right. So
okay.
I think, just to be safe and until people have done the studies on different age groups, the sex differences, until that's clear, just doing a short 30 seconds to a minute, and it doesn't need to have ice in it. Anything less than 15 degrees will activate the cold shock response.
Yeah, there you go. Look, I feel that. I like that. When I do it, I can feel exactly what he's talking about there. And longer for me doesn't add any benefits. And I think you've also got to look at the stage of life you're at. I have a lot, and a lot of my ladies have a lot of unhealthy stresses in their
Mm.
life. And so you've got to find that line between, okay, well, is this just adding to that? And is this going to, have an impact on my cortisol or my melatonin production? And so that's why but there is something there. So that's one.
Hmm.
Um, I I am a big supplement girl. I have quite a big supplement stack, and a lot of our,
Let's do that. Let's do that now. Let's compare supplement stacks.
okay, all right, okay. But sorry, I'll just add one more. So we talked about the VO2 max. We talked about
Yes.
hot and cold therapy.
We talked about muscle.
We talked about muscle. I would sleep is such an
Hmm.
important biohack. I'm not a mouth. I don't think mouth taping is that's personally, and the research that I've done around it. Um, I don't see the benefit in that, and I know that some people do. I don't know. Are you a mouth taper?
I mouth tape, and I tell you why I mouth tape, because for nearly 40 years I had a deviated septum
Right.
from getting my nose broken when I was a kid, and then broken again when I was
Yeah.
boxing, and so could not breathe through my nose, so was a mouth breather. And
Okay.
then when I got my nose fixed, started nose breathing, but would often mouth breathe at night. So I tape up to make sure that I'm nasal breathing,
Right.
because I need to retrain
You've got
myself.
to retraining. I think again, if you are in the 2%ers and maybe you're an elite athlete, or maybe you've got, like what you're talking about, you might have a medical condition. But for example, a huge proportion of our members have undiagnosed sleep apnea, and it
Yeah,
can be
and that can be dangerous.
can be
Agreed.
really
Agreed.
dangerous to mouth tape. So I just don't, it's just not one you go and do blindly, it
Yeah,
would be my,
I
you need to go
agree.
and seek counsel. It's not one that, oh yeah, just go and give it a go. Um, and so yeah, that would be one that I tend to kind of
Yep.
park. So yeah, let's talk about supplements. So again, a lot of the really targeted supplements are, you would need to have one-on-one, but I'm going to kind of part, I'll talk about the targeted supplements that we see deficient and insufficient, but the ones that I think everyone should be taking, and there's lots of great research behind them for a bunch of different reasons, are magnesium,
Yep.
is collagen.
Agreed.
This is for our kind of
Yep.
over 40s. And one to experiment with, works for some, not for all, is creatine.
Yeah.
So magnesium is involved in over 200 interactions in the body. It's so essential, and it impacts lots of things, from muscle function to cognition to sleep to stress management, even to thermoregulation. So a lot of people are insufficient or deficient in
Hmm.
magnesium. There's a theory that it's the soil in the country, or
So, yep.
the quality of the food that we eat. We measure serum magnesium. Now it's not an completely accurate measurement, because really you'd have to do a full muscle biopsy, but it's a pretty good indicator. And it's one of the markers that is so low on so many of our members, and it's very hard to reach an upper limit. So I'm just like, what's the downside?
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Is that with magnesium and things like B vitamins and things like that, it's hard to get to toxicity. Whereas something like vitamin A, you can get to toxicity
Correct.
pretty quickly, right? So I think that's a very good point
And
for
I
our
will just
listeners.
jump in. You just said the B vitamins, B12, kind of
Yeah,
hard to get to toxicity. The
other
challenge
one's
is
not.
B6.
Fix. Yeah,
So do
yeah.
be very careful. I don't know why manufacturers put so much B6 into so much stuff. But I had a lady, actually a presenter on one of the major networks, send me a product that she got on Amazon because she saw some influencer that had 1 million followers touting this product. She ordered it. It's an American product. And she sent it to me with the NIP, the Nutrient Information Panel. it had 350% of the RDI for B6 in it. I said, how did you even get this in the TGA would never allow that in Australia because she bought it cross-border and she had no idea. And it can trigger neuropathy.
Yes, can cause all sorts of nerve issues. That's a very good point. I should have been a bit more precise with my words.
Yeah, it's just one of those
B12.
tricky ones. So just if you are taking a few supplements, just scan down, have a look at B6 and just try to, that's why I'm not a big fan of multivitamins. I always suggest targeted. So I like if you got sleep issues, Designs for Health, the brand, does a really nice magnesium called Trimag Restful Night.
Oh, yeah.
And if you've got more muscle issues, so you're training hard, you might get, sometimes your eyelid flickers, like a little muscle spasm, or you get restless legs or cramps in your legs. Then the Bioceuticals Ultra Night Muscle Ease is a great one to have. Have it in the anytime from 4 p.m. So that would be one. Collagen is another one. We lose up to 30% of our collagen. And it's not just about having great hair, skin, and nails, because I know you're very focused on great hair, skin, and nails, Paul. That ship sailed. Your eyebrows look nice and bushy.
Well and truly sailed for me. But yeah, Cardi is a massive fan of collagen, has had it for years. I've been on the collagen since I had my open heart surgery to help with the repair of the bone.
If you think about collagen's not just a vanity nutrient, you think about it's in our bones, it's connective tissue. So anything that requires that structure. So that's why a lot of women and men as well, but as they're getting older and our collagen declines, you hear a lot of women getting suddenly frozen shoulder or plantar fasciitis. That's because we're starting to see that connective tissue declining. And just like our skin gets wrinkly, so does things like our intestines. You don't think about it, but your digestive tract is very similar to skin, and that endothelial lining gets wrinkly. And then what happens is you have things like SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where they're healthy. The gut bugs end up in the small intestine and parts of the intestine where the gut bugs aren't meant to be. That triggers an inflammatory response. Or you get an increased gut permeability, which is a bad thing. And so suddenly molecules are passing through the gut lining, which historically wouldn't. And that triggers your immune system to flare up. And suddenly you're now getting eczema or an autoimmune condition. So collagen just helps to
just on that. I think a lot of people don't realize 80% of your immune system resides in your gut.
Yeah.
So if you have that leaky gut, then that can trigger all sorts of autoimmune conditions. So
so many health conditions. And I get these poor ladies coming to me saying, I was bomb-proof for years, and now suddenly I have to just get a tiny bit of onion in my lunch and I have to run to the bathroom with IBS, or I've got these rheumatoid arthritis just appears out of nowhere, or Hashimoto's, and a lot of those are gut related and also can be healed through the gut. The great news is the gut loves to heal itself. So if you do the right things, these conditions can be either managed very well or in some cases completely reversed. So that's why I like collagen. It's just one of the many approaches that we have towards all those longevity challenges that we have. Creatine was the other one I mentioned.
Yes.
So this is an interesting one. You would have been like me in the 90s when it had its moment with all the gym bros, and all my male clients were taking it, and us ladies just avoided it because we heard you retain water and it's only for the big muscly guys. But the reason why it's coming back in the spotlight and why I think it's something that our 2%ers who are listening today should consider is because of the cognitive and mood and mental health implications.
Yep.
And
I'm a fan.
Are you a fan?
I am a fan because of the impact on brain health and mood, and especially when you are sleep deprived. There's pretty good research that it ameliorates or reduces the impact of the negative impact on your cognitive function whenever you're sleep deprived. But also research just came out, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, that people with Alzheimer's disease taking creatine improve their function, and it's because it is one of the energy systems that our cells all use. ATP PC is phosphocreatine, and so it's had another renaissance, and yeah, from a neuroscience perspective, I'm all in on it.
I'm so happy to hear you say that.
Have you noticed any negatives with it other than people who have kidney issues? Is there anybody else who should be concerned about creatine and any other groups? I mean, I think vegans should certainly be taking more creatine because they're likely to get a lot less of it in their diet.
It's very hard to get your RDI through nutrition alone. You have to be eating a lot of meat to do it. No is the answer to that question. Unless you've got kidney issues, then there's been a small incidence of some gut disturbances in the early days. But I say with, anything, you kind of titrate up. You might start on a third of a dose just for that first week while your gut adjusts. What I say to people who are like, oh my God, Amelia, do I really have to be taking another supplement? What I say is take it for 6 to 8 weeks. And if you notice a difference, then absolutely keep taking it. And if you don't notice a difference, maybe your natural muscle saturation level was good. But I know for me personally, I started taking it at the start of the year, and I have been shocked at the difference it's made. And there's 3 key areas in my life where I really notice it, so much so that I take it super religiously now. So first of all, it was in my training. So anyone that does high intensity interval training. So I do CrossFit. So you've got, those hard WODs where you're maxing out. You might be doing maximum burpees or chins, but you're also doing strength. We also have a strength component. So in my workouts, I've got such a consistent life. I'm a pretty good guinea pig, and I've been doing it for so long. So I know that if I'm doing a WOD and there's lots of burpees in there, I know I get to burpee number, 6, 7, or 8, and I start to feel that labor coming in, and I start to feel like I have to really work hard. I was doing these WODs and I was getting to like 12, 13, 14 going, oh my God, it's only kicking in now that I'm having to work that bit harder. I noticed my recovery was a lot stronger. I got stronger. So for example, my, heavy deadlifts, heavy squats, I was hitting PBs, getting a lot sorer the next day, which is a great sign that I was able to overload that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But then the other 2 areas was firstly my focus. So if you're someone that has to do a lot of deep, hard work and you find focus, where you're really, where your brain's having to work really hard, I noticed a huge improvement in my ability to focus. And I'd kind of look up and go, holy moly, it's been 2 hours. Wow, I've just been in flow. And then the third area, Paul, which is my husband was the one that actually noticed. He said to me, geez, you've been in a good mood for like a long time.
I thought you were going to mention libido there from Tim.
Not that good. Oh man, I'd be patenting it and buying shares in it. I can't say that it has impacted that, but hey, I'll report back. But definitely, I've noticed those feelings of loss or depression or overwhelm. I've just had more pep in my step. I've just been like, yeah, we'll be fine. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, I think, and look, again, there's good research around it, and actually people with depression taking creatine, it significantly as a positive, significantly positive impact. And I think if you think of all the sports supplement, it's the most tested, it's the safest, it's the one with the biggest impact. And then now you throw in the cognitive and the mood benefits. I think other than people with chronic kidney disease, I think you'd be bonkers if you're not thinking about it.
And look, I do think try it. I think if you
run an experiment.
If you do it for 8 weeks and you don't notice anything, then either your saturation levels are good, or maybe you're not one of those people that's training to the max or focusing or having mood issues. So, I don't want people taking something for no reason.
Yeah,
But
and then you do the experiment, and then you go off it, because sometimes people don't notice the
yeah,
up until they leave it,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
then it's
yeah,
okay. So there's the big three: magnesium, collagen, creatine.
yeah.
Any others in your
Yes.
list?
I know, and I'm going to sound like I'm a supplement peddler. I promise you I'm a food first girl, but we are
Yeah.
just talking supplements. There are two more that are so, so powerful, and a massive trial has just been released that will blow your mind. And you're not going to believe me, but I promise you it's true, because I've literally just been on Channel 9 about it and interviewed I had tracked down the lead researcher. That's how fizzy I am about this. Okay, it's so I'll tell you about the trial, and then I'll reveal the protocol. So this
Cool.
trial was gold standard, double blind, clinical trial, 2,000 older adults, so
Nice.
70 or older, but they've done a sister study for 50 to 70-year-olds that had the same results. So if you're over 50, it's the same. So 2,000 participants, 3 years, double blind clinical trial where
See, already you've got me excited.
yes.
Already I'm excited.
This, honestly, you are going to nerd out. Oh my God, I love talking to a nerd. So, done in Switzerland, but there was all over Europe, all these participants. They were a healthy cohort. They were not an unhealthy. They were screened. Okay, over the 3 years doing these, the group that did the 3 interventions I'm about to reveal had a 61% reduction in invasive cancers, a
Jesus.
39% reduction in pre-frailty, which is basically the precursor to frailty, which we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier with the sarcopenia. And they had a significant reduction in biological age, and they used 6 different biological age standardized tests to
Cool.
measure
Yeah.
biological age. Are you ready for the reveal?
Give it to me.
Okay. Vitamin D supplementation.
I was about to say, and
Oh!
hey, look at
Oh,
this.
there it is. Fantastic. Rapid D, baby. I love
I'm
it.
such a fan. Are you going to throw in omega-3 fatty acids in
I
there?
certainly am, my friend. And the winner is omega-3 fatty acids. And then the third intervention was exercise.
There you go.
And it was
There you
3
go.
days a week, the world's simplest at home using bands. It was one of those, really daggy at home, 30 minutes, 3 times a week. Now, a couple of things here. So the cohort, because I said in the interview with this lady, oh, that doesn't surprise me because so many of my ladies are low in vitamin D. So she said, interestingly, they measured their cohort, and their cohort's vitamin D levels were actually okay. So
Yeah.
and that makes the study even more mind-blowing, because
Can I guess what level they got? Did they measure the level that they got to?
They did, but I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember
I would hazard a guess it's between 100 and 150 nanomoles per liter.
Right.
And what we'll do is we'll get the study and we'll pop it in, and we'll see if I'm right or if I'm full of shit.
Okay.
The interesting thing, because I've just finished my new book. And in terms of my dietary interventions, I talk about a number of different things. One is lowering your ultra-processed food. Other 2 are vitamin D supplementation and omega-3 fatty acid supplementation. Because there's just so much evidence. And now, obviously, this study, I might have to get that study and put it into my book before it's published.
For anyone, well, it is published now. It's called the Do Health Trial. So just Google Do Health Trial, and there's a whole website, and there's a whole bunch of subsequent studies so they've opened up the data. So then other researchers have gone in and done all the data. So the 3 interventions, they broke the groups up into all these different groups. So like one group just did exercise alone, one group just took vitamin D, and they mixed.
I love it.
They mixed it all up. But of course, the group that got the best results was the group that did all 3 interventions. And it just shows that the sum of their parts is greater than their whole. One of their big findings is that, when you combine interventions, you often will receive this better outcome.
And you know why I'm not surprised by this? Because there are now 12 published hallmarks of aging, such as inflammation, loss of proteostasis, mitochondrial dysfunction. There's 12 that has been recognized. And again, in my book, exercise targets all 12 of the hallmarks of aging. Vitamin D, I can't remember whether it's 10 or 12 off the top of my head, and omega-3, at least 7 or 8 of those hallmarks of aging. So there are multiple entry points into the body by which these are having positive effects. And then the synergy, as you say, if they're all having positive, then that synergy.
It's that synergistic effect.
Yes.
And you don't need to be insufficient or deficient in those in those nutrients for it to be beneficial. In fact, she said when they massaged the data and they pulled out the deficient or insufficient people, that 61% reduction in invasive cancers jumped a lot higher. So that's what blew my mind, because I was like, oh, is it just because everyone's so low in those nutrients? But it's like, no, it actually offers a protective element. And that's a true biohack. You know what I mean? Like people talk about biohacking.
Yes.
This is, in my mind, what true biohacking is, where you've got average normal levels. So you're not deficient or insufficient, but then you biohack by even adding more, and you get this huge reduction in invasive cancers by 61%. Like, knock me over with a feather.
This is right. So this is the point where, if you're listening, stop listening to wankers like Professor David Sinclair touting fucking MMN that has got really small industry-backed studies that are just not. Just buy fucking vitamin D and good quality omega-3 fish oil. And look, neither me or you. We don't have any brands that we're associated with.
I'm not affiliated.
Right?
I'm not. I wish I did. Jeez, I'd be a millionaire by now.
I know, but look, neither of us want to go down that
we
path
don't want to.
for good reasons, right? So this is what my doc put me on, is Rapid D.
That's Orthoplex?
Orthoplex Rapid D, and fuck, my levels went boom right up. And I am a big fan. Like most, and this is where the medical system and functional medicine are very different. And I know you know this because you're in this space, right?
Yeah.
It is the medical system. Doctors don't even test for it. And they will say, don't worry about your vitamin D unless you are insufficient, right? Which is around
or even deficient. Even,
deficient,
most of our ladies come in insufficient. Their doctors haven't mentioned anything. Their vitamin D has to be well below 50 before they suggest. Whereas we like our ladies at least over 80, ideally over 100.
Yeah, and I'm the same. Get into that 100 to 150 band, because optimal is very different to what the sick care system will say. And that's, we don't have a healthcare system, we got a sick care system, right? So that's the difference. So if you want to be optimal, get your vitamin D up. The other thing is omega-3s. There's a test called Omega Quant. You can go to Omega Quant and measure your omega-3 index, which is a measure of the omega-3s in your red blood cells, which is a marker of the last 3 months. People with an omega-3 index of 8 live 5 years longer than people with an omega-3 index of 5, right? And nothing else
6.
in nutrition has that, right?
Yeah. So it's a spot, it's a finger prick. If we're talking about a similar, it's actually a dry blood spot. So you actually prick your finger. There's a couple of great, we do this test and you get a whole bunch of omega, like an advanced omega panel. You get omega-3 to 6 ratio, you get omega-3 index. And so, for example, I'm on a 120-day protocol at the moment with I'm actually using a brand called Zinzino, which is a Swiss brand. So we're measuring the blood spot, and I'm taking this citrus based oil. I actually mix it with my dark chocolate collagen, my Chief. I love Chief, does a great dark hot chocolate collagen. And so I taste like a Jaffa, because you've got this omega-3 oil that is citrusy and you can't taste the fishiness of it. And then you have the collagen. And so over this 120 days, and they've done something like, I don't know, 400,000 of these tests. And so they have a lot of research to show the improvements. And so I'm hoping mine will be over 8. My omega-3 index, my omega index will be over 8% when I retest in a few weeks.
Yeah, and so all our family got tested, and Oscar's been the one who's been the best at taking his. His is now above 8.
Great.
Mine's about 6.5 and was about 5. Now, I take Nordic Naturals. And again, listeners, we have no affiliations with any brands. any fish oil that you want, just don't buy the shit from Chemist Warehouse. Please do not buy that shit.
Yeah.
You can go to I4, which does independent testing, screens them for 10,000 toxins, looks at the purity. So you talked about Zinzino. I take Nordic Naturals. There will be good quality ones. Spend your money on that shit, because that impact of, particularly when you combine vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids in exercise, for boom.
And
We just don't need to talk about anything else, do we?
I know. I feel like let's just, guys, get off the podcast, go and get on your vitamin D and omega-3. But just a quick fun fact that I learned from interviewing the head researcher from that Drew Health trial. They used an algae-based omega-3. Not a fish-based one. And one of the there were two reasons. Number one, because this was a double-blind study, that we couldn't have a fishy taste, because it needed to be, because the placebo group were getting a sugar pill or whatever it was. So, but number two, for sustainability, they did a lot of research and they said algae-based. But interestingly, throughout my career, I've always heard that algae-based omega-3 supplements have a worse uptake in the body, that they're not as bioavailable as the fish one. And I mentioned this to her and she's like, well, we've got the 3,000 studies, 3,000 subject study to show that, yes, there was a big uptake in it. So I wonder if we might be seeing, and one of my girlfriends who owns a bunch of supplement stores, she goes, we don't really have many algae-based omega-3. She couldn't think of any off the top of her head. So yeah, there you go.
That's normally one that I say, if you're vegetarian or vegan, you can go and
and don't be upset. Don't be upset if because
maybe we all need to look at it.
We might see more of them coming through.
Okay, so we have magnesium, we have collagen, we have creatine, we got vitamin D, we got omega-3.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that is worth pushing the boat out on?
Only if you're insufficient or deficient. So this is where testing comes in. So pretty much all of those, if you all, I'm relatively comfortable recommending those. And of course you can cycle in and out of them. I don't want you, having buckets of powder a day. So you might go through different phases. The rest is just targeted. So for example, a lot of our ladies are low in iron, but I would never recommend supplementing with iron unless you've been diagnosed. But that's a big energy one. So if you're one of those people that are listening going, oh yeah, I've been low in iron for years, I'm like, get onto that shit. You need to improve that, because if you're waking up with your knuckles dragging on the ground, you're getting sick more regularly, low iron is a big one. So yeah, the rest of them are really just more around if your own unique markers are insufficient, and then you take a targeted one. B12 is another one to measure and track.
Yeah, cool. Very, very good. And look, those lists, the only other supplements that I'm taking, too, is because of my recent condition. So I take iron because when you do open heart surgery, or even before it, because of the condition, your hemoglobin drops through the floor. And my hemoglobin, so I'm taking beef liver capsules. Vegans, just close your ears on that one. The other one is ubiquinol, which is coenzyme Q10.
Yes.
And that's, again, for my heart, because I've just had open heart surgery. I'm not suggesting everybody takes it. But the one that I think is worthwhile looking into is Glynac. That combination of glycine and N-acetylcysteine.
Okay, yes.
And so I remember with Professor Grant Scofie, we were at a talk with this psychiatrist, was showing all the studies they were doing on N-acetylcysteine for mood and like psychosis and just amazing. And then I saw studies on Glynac and a series of studies that in animals, they reduce oxidative stress, they reduce inflammation, they improve mitochondrial function, do a couple of other things, and enhance longevity. And then there was a series of studies in older adults that showed they improved mitochondrial function, improved oxidative stress, reduced inflammation. Obviously, they didn't look at longevity because it's not long enough of a study. But when you see something like that, where you see it in animals, there's an impact on longevity, and there are describable mechanisms that contribute to that. And then you see in humans the same mechanisms being upregulated. That makes me sit up and take notice.
Yeah.
But again, probably don't need to be on that until you're in your 40s
No, and
or even 50s.
I tell you, the cohort that responds really well to NAC, what you
Yeah.
just mentioned, is peri and menopause transition. At women who are going through the storm season and the hormonal fluctuations, we actually, aside from hormone replacement therapy, which works really well for people, the only other supplement, we don't do the ashwagandha, we don't do the herbs or anything like that, but what we do is a combination of NAC, which you just mentioned, and DIM complex as well. So we use Switch Nutrition. They have a tub of NAC and a tub of DIM, and particularly in the last 2 weeks of your cycle, when estrogen metabolism becomes super important for managing those hormonal fluctuations, we find even if you're taking those just for the 2 weeks leading up to your period, we get a lot of symptom reduction and symptom management. And that's because they work, the mechanism behind it is helping your body to detoxify those sex hormones, particularly those estrogen, where you're getting those estrogen spikes and then falling off a cliff. So yeah, so I learned something today from where you're standing, but for perimenopause, menopause symptoms, it works very well. Certainly for me, it does.
Yeah, and look, the other thing you mentioned there is HRT, and I think that the evidence around HRT now is pretty. There's still a bit of fear out there that because there was old studies showing that it might increase cancer risk, breast cancer risk, and I
Which
think
have all been disproven.
debunked, completely disproven. And I know several women who went on HRT halfway through menopause and went, oh my God, what a difference. Jesus Christ. Why wasn't I on this right from the start? And then for men, I think, which is big in the States, but not so much here, I think at a certain element, and again, this is getting your hormones measured. I think testosterone replacement therapy, I mean, I'm not on it yet because I'm lifting lots of heavy shit and my testosterone's still okay. But I think in the future, I will probably be on some sort of testosterone replacement therapy, because when you have those major hormones that are so critical for us to function normally, when they drop, like just bad shit happens. It really
Absolutely.
does.
Yeah. And we don't have to we don't have to live like that anymore. That this is again true biohacking, when we can help to manage that natural decline, and particularly with women, because you do have such a big hormone readjustment through menopause. It's managing that storm season. And then if you manage it well, just like a sailor manages a storm out on the ocean, he battens down the hatches, he locks the cupboards, he gets the sail ready. You manage and navigate the storm season well, you come out the other side less battered and bruised. And we have so many options available to us now. So it's a really good news story. It's a great time to be aging, because we have got these we have got these great new biohacks at our fingertips. They just have to, that's once you're getting into hormone replacement, you need to be working with a doctor that is really experienced. And that's why I'm a huge advocate of
100%.
integrative functional medicine doctors who are really taking a root cause approach, and they've done a lot of extra training. So you just want to make sure that you're not just dealing with a regular GP who literally hasn't done the training.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I fully endorse that, and I use my functional medicine doctor, big shout out to Caitlin, post-heart surgery, because if I hadn't have been working with her, I can tell you right now, my recovery would not have been as quick or as full as it has been. Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
So look, the last thing that I want the topic that I want to talk about, which is kind of related to this, are key biomarkers to track. Like what are the things that people should be going and doing, including the ones that, you know, your GP can do, that a lot of people just aren't doing because they haven't visited a doctor for years. And this is especially, you know, as you get north of 40, you know, previously I would have said as you get north of 50, but now I just did a podcast this morning on the massive increase in cancers in people under 50 now.
I know, it's
And they
scary,
think
isn't
it's
it?
because we are aging biologically much quicker, and that's why there's more cancer. So I think the 40 is
Yeah.
the new 50, right?
Yeah, if you're
So
one of the unlucky ones that isn't, managing their health well, it's this interesting conundrum. I'll throw two quick stats at you, and then I'll talk
yeah,
about the biomarkers. The average lifespan in Australia has just gone backwards for the first time in 30 years. So
yeah,
I
that's
can't remember exactly.
scary.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, isn't it? With all this great technology, our average lifespan has actually gone backwards for the first
The
time in
first
30 years.
generation that our kids are predicted to not live as long as us. That's
Yeah.
fucked. That
But
is fucked.
But before you go necking yourself, let me give you some good news story. The rate of centenarians in Australia, people over 100 years old, is growing at a rate of 6% per year.
Oh, wow.
So this is
That's cool.
two contradicting stats, right? You go, well, how can that be? Well, I'll explain how that is. The reason why our age has gone backwards is because of chronic, mostly preventable disease.
Yeah.
So let's think of, if we really want to biohack our way into longevity and a long life, the first goal is to avoid the 4 horsemen, as Peter Attia calls them.
Yes.
Okay, because that is, if you're able to avoid the 4 horsemen, that's why our lifespan's going backwards. If you're one of the lucky ones like you and me, you proactively went and had heart surgery to avoid one of the 4 horsemen, which is heart disease. If you are able to avoid the 4 horsemen, then you are going to live a bloody long time. And at the moment, I feel like the majority of your listeners are so interested in their health, they're going to be that cohort. But the 4 horsemen are heart disease, metabolic disease, so type 2 diabetes, fastest growing, 100% preventable, cancer, and neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, dementia, etc. So all of those 4, what underpins that is inflammation. That's why we hear so much about managing our inflammation. That's why omega-3, vitamin D, the mechanism, and has been so successful in that trial. So yeah, there's a good news story for you before I get on to biomarkers. But that's why prevention is so powerful, and taking a proactive approach to our health. Because if we're a true biohacker, our number one goal is to avoid the 4 horsemen. How do we do that? Well, we measure and we track and we pick up the early whispers. So for example, heart disease. What's your cholesterol like? Precursor for heart disease. And it's a whole other podcast on cholesterol, but we've got our standard cholesterol panels that you'll get, where you'll get your triglycerides, your LDL, your HDL. Okay, if you're just getting the standard ones done and everything's perfect, then you're good. But if you're coming in and your LDL, which is the lousy cholesterol's high, and your triglycerides are high, well, you might want to then consider doing what in functional health world, we'll then send you off for an advanced lipid panel, so we can actually dig down deeper. Whereas a regular GP,
I would say not. You want to consider, you bloody well should.
Yeah.
Go and get your LDL particle size measures, your LP little a, your ApoB, all of those things. Correct. Because it's a very crude instrument, just overall LDL and HDL cholesterol. It's crude as, right?
Correct, 100%. But for those of you that are sitting here and your cholesterol's perfect and you don't have body fat issues and you've got no high blood pressure, then that's probably enough for you. You might want to save your, $200 or whatever it costs to get the advanced panel. But for a lot of my ladies, they have never struggled with cholesterol, and suddenly they hit peri and menopause and their cholesterol jumps up, and they have no idea why. So the whole reason why we measure and track these biomarkers is to pick up the early warning signs. And your GP won't tell you these because they're just too busy. And the GPs are designed, the medical system's designed to detect disease. I have these ladies that have had insulin resistance for 5 or 10 years, that we look at their markers. We measure a marker called HOMA, IR, so HOMAIR, which is just, it's actually a calculation of a bunch of other metabolic markers. But that will definitively tell you if you're insulin resistant. And HbA1c is another really powerful one. We know that, we like our ladies or our members to be under 5.2% for HbA1c, but we know that 5.6 to 6.5 is pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So the markers we track, in our program, Inner Vitality, which is the main program that our members start on. So if you come into Yasmina, if you come into Vitality 360, we do this test, you get 55 biomarkers, and then you do our Inner Vitality program. And so we're measuring cardiovascular markers. We're measuring inflammatory markers. We want to look at HCRP, creatine kinase, lactate dehydrogenase. There's lots of inflammation markers, but they're ones that we just look at. We look at certain hormones such as thyroid panel. We don't do the sex hormones. That's a whole other conversation. But we certainly, for some people, we do send them off for them. We look at liver function, kidney function. We look at key micronutrients. So iron is one. We spoke about vitamin D as well. So it's important to start to track and understand what these markers are telling you. So EGFR, for example, is a really important kidney marker.
Yeah.
Kidney disease is silent. And we have people that are at stage 3 or stage 4 kidney disease and didn't even realize it. And EGFR is a great marker to help you also understand how well your body detoxifies. And, we have lots of jokes in the program of who's going to have the worst hangover. And if your EGFR is, lower than this mark, then you're going to have a much worse hangover than someone whose EGFR is well over 90. So yeah, we educate you so that you understand what these markers mean and you know how to track them and pick up those early whispers so that you can keep those 4 horsemen at bay.
Yeah. And look, I totally agree that keeping those things at bay is absolutely critical. And would fully endorse people to go along and explore those deeper markers. And even before they get there, and if people go, well, I don't have the money for that, I think making a screen for metabolic syndrome is so friggin' important. So for people listening, metabolic syndrome is basically a cluster of conditions, or it's a condition that there's 3 from 5 markers, and it depends who you listen to, right? About what the cutoffs are. But basically it's high blood pressure, low HDL, or the good in inverted commas cholesterol, high triglycerides, high fasting glucose, and central obesity, high waist circumference. 3 from 5, you have metabolic syndrome, and especially if you have 4 or 5. And what that means, metabolic syndrome means that you are falling apart metabolically, and metabolic syndrome dramatically increases the risk of every one of the 4 horsemen. So if you want a very cheap and easy thing, it's because your doctor will do all of those things, right?
Yeah.
Other than your waist circumference, and you can measure your own bloody waist circumference. But I tell you what, if you have got metabolic syndrome, you need to sort your shit. There's like work is less important. This is the most important thing for you to sort out. And that's where then, if you do have that flag, that's where then you absolutely have to go and see somebody like you to do a deep dive to say, okay, so how do I sort this stuff out? Right?
And the great news is with metabolic dysfunction or insulin resistance, the beginnings of your body, it's basically what you've just described there is a body that is overfed, a body that is struggling to manage the calories that are coming in. And so liver kicks in to try to help out and say, oh, we're going to release more cholesterol to try to bind. Fasting insulin goes up, blood glucose goes up. All of this is happening because the body is trying to manage being in a state of overfed. But the great news is there are lots of really simple little tweaks that you can make rather than, oh my gosh, I've got to overhaul my whole diet and change my whole lifestyle. We often say to people, some people think, oh, I need to lose weight to get healthy. Well, often with these members, we say you need to get healthy in order to lose weight.
Yeah.
And so this
Fix
is
your
where things
metabolism.
like fasting, like we say to our members, you must feel hungry for 15 minutes twice a day below the neck. So feel that hunger below the neck, not in your head or your mouth, because that's a craving. That's a different, you got to feel the grumble in your stomach. Don't eat breakfast until you feel the grumble. There it goes, ghrelin, the gremlin hormone, ghrelin. Feel that hunger, sit with that hunger for 15 minutes, then eat something. And then a second time during the day, because what you're doing then is you're increasing your metabolic flexibility. Your body is searching for energy because your blood sugar's coming down, which is fabulous. And then it's hopefully switching back on lipolysis, which is fat burning, because we have so much, an abundance of amazing energy just sitting on our asses and our tummies. But when we've got metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance, our body has forgotten how to access. You can't switch between burning glucose and fat. It's like like imagine trying to change the gears in a rusted old combi van. So
and can
all
I tell
these,
you, sorry,
yeah,
Amelia, can I just jump in there about how much energy we have? I often tell listeners, some of my listeners have heard it, but I've got a research paper of the world record fast, right? And it's a Scottish guy in, I think it was 1971, who was 200 kilos. And he went in to see his doc and he said, Doc, I'm a bit fat. I think I need to stop eating for a while. Will you supervise me? And he fasted for 382 days.
Are you like fully fasted?
Fully fasted. After, I think it was 6 months or a year, he started having a tiny drop of milk in his tea, but he did not eat anything for 382 days. He lost 120 kilos and he kept it off. So those people who tell you that fasting is dangerous.
I know. Or I've just finished watching Alone. Have you watched any of those series?
I'm not a big TV fan, but that is the one thing that I do like.
I mean, those people lived off the odd eel for 90 days or something. But I've also heard a fun fact that we have enough energy on our body, stored as body fat, to walk from Sydney to Melbourne without eating. So
there you go. There you go. Most people have got oodles of energy kicking around on them.
Yeah.
And it's and that's what it was there for in hunter-gatherer times. But
absolutely.
Sorry, I did cut you off mid-sentence. Apologies for that.
My good news message to those that are wanting to punch you and I in the face, saying, yeah, we know that. We know we're overfed. We know that we've just got to clean up our diet. We're like, well, you bloody try to do it when you're insulin resistant and grown up on ultra-processed food. So feel free to punch us in the face, because I have seen in my 26 years how hard it is to change habits. So my good news story is when it comes to insulin resistance and reversing that and reversing metabolic syndrome, it's lots of really little easy tweaks done. So don't worry so much about the scales to start with, because if you are insulin resistant or pre-diabetic, what used to work won't work anymore. And so the scales will just make you want to neck yourself because it's just too depressing. So fasting twice a day, a supplement called myo-inositol, which is a very safe insulin sensitizer. Again, my ladies will go super excited about taking the supplement. I'm like, that's just a tweak. It's going to make a small difference, but it's not a game changer. And of course, exercise. So a combination of both cardio strength. I mean, honestly, as long as you're out there moving. And then cutting down those carbohydrates, really starting to bring those carbs right down will improve your insulin sensitivity. So just focus on making those habit changes and reducing if you pick one part of your day that you know is a struggle for you. So, I've got a massive sweet tooth. For me, I had to work on after dinner because I was all having these big desserts. So just pick that one part of the day that is your downfall and just hyper focus on improving that. And then over time, the habits just slowly improve, and then you'll start to see that lipolysis kicking back on again. And look, if you are really unhealthy and you've struggled and you've tried everything, then it is worth having a conversation with your doctor about Ozempic.
Yeah, that's true. Or get your mouth taped for 382 days. I jest. There's one little language change just before we finish up. There's one little language change that I think we should do that would have a massive behavioral intervention or a behavioral effect, and it's changing type 2 diabetes to carbohydrate intolerance. I
Ah,
think if we just did that,
yeah.
um, it would be an absolute game changer. Forget about type 2 diabetes. You are carbohydrate intolerant.
I love that because everyone knows when they're dairy intolerant and,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
yep, gluten intolerant. I love it. Sorry, can't. No to the pasta. I'm actually carbohydrate intolerant.
Exactly.
I have a flare up. It's
just
called
just
fat
get that
around my
in your
middle.
head, just drive that that's the big thing that worked with my mum, who was diabetic for decades, and since bringing that on board and visiting Camp Taylor, she has now lost over 30 kilos in weight and resolved her diabetes, right, which is just amazing. And
Wow.
that
You must be so
psychological shift,
proud.
yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool to see. And
She's now going to
now
be on this planet for
and
an extra 10 years.
I'm now doing strength training and in the gym, almost 80, and in the gym lifting heavy shit, which is really cool
Wow,
to
that is
see.
such a good news story. You should definitely write her into your books. I think
Indeed.
that's amazing. I love hearing stories like that.
So, Amelia, look, this has been awesome conversation of violent agreement all over the place. Where can our listeners go to find out more about you and to join your Vitality 360 program and any other things that you got
Yes.
going on?
Yeah. Oh, look, so if you go to v360.health, that's where you can see my business partner, Dr. Yasmina, and myself. We run this platform, Vitality 360, where we bring all those functional medicine tests to life, and we run programs to help, whether it's reversing your insulin resistance. But our flagship program is Inner Vitality. I call it the Sleep Well at Night test. You get your 55 biomarkers. It's a great starting point. You can also get your BioAge on top of that as well, which a lot of people like to do. And then Instagram is probably where I'm most active. And I give lots of free education, ebooks, supplement cheat sheets away, and I'm very active on DMs. So follow me on Instagram. We can get connected. You can get to know me a lot better there. And then, of course, my podcast, Healthy Her. It is directed towards mums. So if you're a mum in midlife, then it's a perfect one for you.
Awesome. This has been brilliant. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge, and keep doing what you're doing and keep loving it, which I'm sure you
And
will.
thanks so much.